My beloved child, listen to me. This is not a coincidence. This is not an accident. You were guided here by a force greater than your understanding. The time has come to rise from the shadows and reclaim your place. The world has lied to you, told you you are small, but I am here to remind you of your greatness. Stay with me. Each sentence is a stepping stone to your awakening. This message holds the answers your soul has been crying for. You are chosen for something bigger than your fear. Don't walk away. Now the moment has arrived. Let us step into the truth together. You need to pay close attention. This isn't just another moment. It's the specific time I set aside to finally tell you what your spirit has been longing to hear. You've been waiting, you've been crying, and you've been wondering if I even saw you in the midst of your disappointment and confusion. I cannot wait a second longer. My voice is coming now. Not as a whisper, but as a mighty roar, sweeping away every lie, every doubt, and every wall that has kept my truth from settling deep inside you. I was never ignoring you. I was waiting for the exact moment when your heart would be most open to receive everything I've been holding for you in the hidden parts of heaven. My child, that silence wasn't punishment. It was the final preparation before an unveiling. I watched you cry into your pillow while you pretended to be strong for others. I saw you question your worth because the answers you desperately needed never seemed to come. But now I must reveal something to you. While you thought I was absent, I was actually moving pieces you couldn't see. I was speaking to people you don't even know yet, clearing paths in places you've never been. All for what is coming toward you faster than you realize. You are standing on the edge of a supernatural shift. The reason I'm speaking to you with such urgency is that you're about to step through a door that can only be opened with clarity, not confusion. I have held back storms that would have destroyed you and delayed blessings until your strength was refined. I answered your prayers through a process instead of a miracle. Because I wanted your roots to grow deep, not remain shallow. I needed you to grow, not just in promise, but in power. Now, because you stayed and trusted me, even when you felt like giving up, I can finally tell you that the wait is over. It's not over because time has passed, but because the appointed hour has arrived. Heaven is no longer waiting. This is not a trial. This is the release. The tormenting silence was the enemy trying to convince you that I didn't care. But I want you to know I was closer in that quietness than you could have ever imagined. Your name has been mentioned in divine meetings. Your future has been discussed in rooms you haven't entered. Your breakthrough has already begun to move toward you. But you needed to know the why before I released the what. This message is more than just reassurance. It's a holy alert that everything that has been withheld is now being released at my command. The reason for my silence was that I was waiting for the final piece to fall into place. Your full surrender, not to the process, but to the pace I chose for your miracle. My child, you are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not behind. You are right on time for what I'm about to pour into your life. The moment you finish reading this, you will feel the divine weight of presence wrap around you like a holy wind. I have come to walk with you into the season I designed with your name written on it in fire. The time for wondering and walking in circles is over. You are standing at the threshold of fulfillment, and I couldn't stay silent another minute. Because the promise I made you is about to knock on your door, and you need to be awake when it does. I need you to feel the urgency behind what I'm telling you. What you once interpreted as silence was never neglect. It was divine surgery happening deeper than you could comprehend. When you pleaded for me to act, and it seemed I held back, I wasn't absent. I was active, operating in dimensions your senses couldn't access. Your soul needed conditioning, not just for victory, but for the weight of glory I've chosen to place upon your life. If I had answered every request when you asked, it would have destroyed the future I was shaping around you. The truth is, the very moments you thought I ignored you were the very hours I was working hardest behind the veil, testing the foundation of your inner strength, reinforcing your emotional capacity, and fortifying your faith so it could carry the magnitude of what I intend to entrust to you. I wasn't punishing you, I was forming something unshakable inside you. Your soul had to be stretched beyond comfort, not because I delight in your discomfort, but because I require an endurance that cannot collapse under pressure. What is coming to you is bigger than favor. It is purpose in full motion. To hold that, your character had to be carved through delay. I wasn't just preserving your future. I was cultivating your spirit to handle what others would have squandered. I was removing the fragile parts of you that couldn't sustain the destiny I designed. Every slow moment, every closed door, every whispered no was really me saying, "You're not ready yet, but I'm not done." The world moves fast, but heaven moves when timing and maturity collide. I waited for your soul to align with the rhythm of your assignment. You were not forgotten. You were being transformed, layer by layer, until the residue of fear broke and the roots of faith ran deep enough to hold the weight of impact. You are now standing on the edge of what I've been preparing for so long, and your soul, now refined, is able to discern what it couldn't before. You are no longer fragile. You no longer cry over what you used to chase or beg for validation. I stripped that need away in the waiting. I let you walk alone so you would stop leaning on crowds and start leaning into me. I delayed certain things not to punish your hope, but to make it pure, anchored, and rooted in a truth that cannot be shaken by outcomes. The prayers you once thought had vanished are alive in the chambers of my design, unfolding in a timing that is not late. It is perfect. I didn't answer prematurely because I refused to bless you where you hadn't yet grown. Now that your soul has been shaped by trust and not by a transaction, by obedience instead of an outcome, I can finally release what has been held back. Not because I changed my mind, but because you let me change your posture. The weight has produced something holy in you, something unmovable, something incorruptible. You don't even realize it, but angels have been dispatched because of how you stayed faithful when you could have walked away. Heaven has documented your quiet victories, and I'm now turning those private battles into public deliverance. I'm calling forth harvests that had to wait for the soil of your soul to mature. The delay wasn't a denial, it was a sacred pause to ensure your breakthrough didn't arrive prematurely and rot in your hands. What you are about to experience isn't just an answer, it's an unveiling of a deeper version of yourself, forged in patience, drenched in grace, and ready for destiny. The refinement is finished, the silence served its purpose, and now as I speak, the momentum you couldn't create on your own is being divinely accelerated. Everything that was paused is resuming with supernatural speed because your soul finally has the capacity to carry what has been waiting for you all along. The power of your tears. My child, while the night surrounded you and no one saw the ache that weighed down your heart, not a single tear escaped my attention. You were not alone in that silent room where you thought no comfort would ever reach you. I dispatched my holy messengers to collect every drop of sorrow that fell from your eyes. You see, in heaven, nothing is lost. Not your grief, not your gasps for air between prayers, not your trembling questions whispered into your pillow. All of it, every flicker of pain, was preserved in eternity's record. Not as evidence of defeat, but as the purest expression of faith that dares to trust even when there are no signs of rescue. Those nights when you couldn't explain your sadness, when you buried your emotions just to function, and when you were forced to smile while breaking internally, those were the moments I leaned in closest. You thought your breakdown was invisible, but heaven was alert and attentive, watching you battle unseen burdens, noting every suppressed cry as sacred worship. I want you to know something few understand. Your tears were not signs of weakness. They were offerings, proof that you still believed I was listening. Even when you questioned my silence, you still looked upward. Even when hope flickered, you didn't extinguish it. Even when you wanted to give up, you waited one more day. That, my child, moved heaven. While others judged your journey by your outward strength, I saw the war raging inside and declared you victorious. Not because you felt strong, but because you kept going. The unseen struggle you endured birthed something far more valuable than applause: endurance. Your private pain became holy ground. The nights you spent crumpled in despair were more sacred than stages, more powerful than sermons, and more precious than gold. I want you to hear me clearly. Those tears did not vanish into the void. They are being redeemed into miracles. Every cry you released in loneliness is now echoing in the courts of heaven as declarations of breakthrough. The delay wasn't just about time, it was about volume. Heaven has been amplifying the sound of your midnight weeping into a mighty roar that is now shaking the very walls of opposition around your life. Yes, those tears planted something eternal, something irreversible, something that cannot be stolen by any force of darkness. And now I am turning them into keys that unlock doors no one can shut. Doors you didn't even know existed because you were too busy surviving to see what was ahead. I'm assigning favor to follow the very places where pain tried to bury you. I'm sending recompense to the wounds that tried to convince you that you'd never feel joy again. I'm sending divine reversals to every situation that seemed cursed, simply because you endured without understanding. Your tears became triggers that activated interventions, visitations, vindication, and restoration. All of it was initiated because of what you poured out in secret. No word you whispered in the dark was wasted. No sigh you breathed into silence went unnoticed. I stood at the edge of your bed when you thought no one was near. I hovered over your slumped shoulders when your strength failed. I cradled your weary spirit when even prayer seemed too hard to form. And now, the same pain that once strained you will be the very place I pour my power. Your tear-stained seasons are over. They have completed their purpose. While the world sees only the surface, I know the depth you now carry. I shaped it with every moment you thought you were being broken, when in truth I was creating a vessel designed to overflow with a kind of joy that cannot be shaken. I'm not giving you back what you lost. I'm giving you something entirely new, formed in the fire of endurance and drenched in the rain of your suffering. You cried, but now you'll dance. You mourned, but now you'll sing. And it begins now, not later. This is the moment the angels rise with the records of your weeping and declare, the turning has come. You are being armed, not punished. Every wound you carried, every invisible bruise on your soul, and every piercing ache you thought served no purpose. I want you to know that none of it slipped past me. What broke you didn't break my plans, it sharpened them. I allowed you to walk through the valley, not because I was absent, but because I was building something in the dark that daylight could never produce. The very trials that tried to ruin you were actually forging the blade I now place in your spirit, not to attack others, but to cut through deception, hopelessness, and everything hell tried to chain you with. You weren't being punished, you were being armed. I didn't let the enemy destroy you, I let him exhaust himself trying. And now, every scar has become a seal of your authority. What you went through, what nearly buried your faith, is the very thing I've transformed into a shield that now surrounds your future. My child, you asked me why I didn't rescue you sooner. The truth is, I was rescuing you while letting the fire teach you how to walk through it. You learned how to stand while shaking. You discovered how to breathe while drowning. You became fluent in survival when you didn't even know that was the language your future would demand. That pain didn't deform you, it disciplined you. It taught you to see with my eyes. It taught you to listen for what cannot be heard with ears. It built discernment. It cracked pride. It killed the dependence on human approval. And most importantly, it emptied you enough to be filled by me alone. And now, that same pain is what I'm turning into a compass. You thought it was just a memory, something you'd always wish you could erase. But what you didn't know was that I wrote my name across every chapter of your suffering. The worst days of your life became the training grounds for the best days ahead. I used the weight of that season to strengthen the muscle of purpose in you. You are no longer fragile. You are forged. You are not just surviving. You are now a carrier of deliverance. The moments you screamed into the void, I heard every word and wove them into my plan. I didn't erase your past because I planned to redeem it publicly. What was meant to be your downfall has now become your divine resume. You walked through shame, but shame didn't stick to you. You faced betrayal, but it didn't corrupt your kindness. You endured isolation, but it didn't kill your compassion. That is what makes you dangerous now. Not to me, but to the kingdom of darkness. You were built in secret to carry power in public. No one saw the training. No one understood why you were hit so hard. No one knew how many times you felt like quitting. But now I'm turning all of that unseen pain into a testimony no one will be able to ignore. You are rising not because you fought harder than others, but because you let me shape you through what should have destroyed you. You didn't harden or close off. You stayed soft in the storm. That's why I'm going to raise you in a way that shocks even your enemies. You never imagined that the very thing that tried to kill your joy would be the birthplace of your authority. But now I'm awakening the part of you that no longer flinches at adversity. You've been through too much to be shaken now. Your pain produced more than endurance. It uncovered the warrior I designed you to become. This is why I kept you alive. This is why I brought you through things others didn't survive. This is why I'm speaking now with urgency, because the weapon formed in the fire is ready to be lifted. I've waited for this moment, not to reward your pain, but to commission it. What once caused you to collapse will now be the platform you stand on. This is the season where the hurt becomes holy, and your story becomes my sword. The storm wasn't punishment, it was a mercy. You wondered why the intensity increased without warning, why everything stable around you began to shake all at once, as if the ground beneath your life had turned against you. But what you saw as chaos, I was using as a divine investigation. The turbulence wasn't a punishment, it was a strategy. I wasn't tearing you apart. I was pulling to the surface what had been buried too deep for your own discernment. There were mindsets wrapped in fear hiding beneath your bold declarations. There were compromises cloaked in comfort that you had accepted as normal. There were hidden fractures in your trust that couldn't be revealed until the wind started tearing at what you thought was strong. And so I sent a storm, not to destroy your home, but to show you what was nesting inside its walls. You see, there were attachments you clung to that weren't safe, expectations you built on illusions, and dependencies you nurtured that were quietly draining your spirit. You had grown accustomed to surviving on spiritual fumes, calling it faith when it was really routine dressed in devotion. So I allowed the wind to press, the rain to pound, and the atmosphere around you to scream. Suddenly, the foundation cracked, not to collapse, but to cleanse. I wasn't angry with you. I was trying to get your attention. That shaking was a mercy. It loosened the roots of things I never planted. It exposed habits that kept you cycling in patterns you prayed to escape. I didn't enjoy watching you panic, but I knew you'd never release those quiet lies unless the storm came knocking louder than the comfort you were used to. You prayed for growth, so I had to challenge your environment. You asked for clarity, so I had to remove distractions you thought were blessings. You begged me to use you, so I had to ensure your foundation could carry the responsibility without crumbling. And now, on the other side of the turmoil, I want you to see it clearly. Not everything that broke was bad. Some things needed to fall. Some relationships had grown toxic in their silence. Some positions had become prisons. Some dreams were never divinely inspired, but were self-imposed expectations built out of comparison. I loved you too much to let those things become your identity. So I sent the storm, not to ruin what was holy, but to reveal what was hollow. It showed you how fragile certain promises were when they weren't rooted in my truth. It exposed how quickly people can walk away when their benefit from you disappears. It revealed the places where you had grown numb, where you had built walls out of survival and called them boundaries when they were actually isolation. You saw yourself differently after the wind finished its assignment. That was the point. You began to see me differently too. Not just as the one who rescues, but as the one who rebuilds from the inside out. I want you to realize something powerful now. Your resilience wasn't born in peace. It was forged in pressure. Your clarity didn't come from calm. It came when I removed the filters. Your maturity didn't bloom in sunshine. It sprang forth from the rubble of what once looked stable. And now, my child, I can build with you. I can entrust you with more because you have released what was silently compromising your destiny. The fear that paralyzed you is no longer your ceiling. The dependency that disguised itself as loyalty is no longer controlling your choices. The assumptions you carried about who I am have been washed away, leaving space for real revelation. The storm didn't destroy you, it delivered you. It baptized you in fire and raised you in truth. Now, with new eyes and an awakened heart, you'll move forward with power, not pretense. You'll no longer carry what was quietly killing you. And this is just the beginning of what I'm about to reveal next. My whisper was a declaration of trust. Even as ridicule echoed around you, trying to convince you that I had abandoned you, I was still speaking softly, steadily, and without interruption into the depths of who you truly are. Their words tried to dismantle your confidence, to make you question your identity, to drown your discernment beneath layers of shame and confusion. But while their tone was louder, mine was deeper. While their noise was aggressive, my truth was intimate. I never shouted over their accusations because my authority doesn't need to compete. Every insult hurled at you, every sarcastic laugh, and every skeptical lie was designed by the enemy to make you doubt not only the path you were on, but the voice that called you to it. But what they didn't realize was that I don't speak to your surface. I speak to your substance. I don't respond to mockery with explanations. I respond with manifestations. My whisper wasn't a lack of power. It was a declaration that I trust you to recognize me even in quietness. I chose to speak inwardly because I knew you'd learn to listen beyond volume. You've matured not by proving them wrong, but by staying tuned to what I said before they ever said anything. Their judgments came from their own confusion. Their dismissal came from ignorance. They could only see what their eyes allowed. But I was writing a story in dimensions they never had access to. You were misjudged because I kept your process hidden. You were underestimated because I didn't announce what I was building in you. And though their mockery stung, it couldn't penetrate the layers I had wrapped around your purpose. I shielded your heart in the very moments you thought it would break. I sent my spirit to remind you again and again that your validation doesn't originate from applause. It originates from assignment. You didn't crumble under their opinions because I had already grounded you in truth. You're still standing, not because the words didn't hit hard, but because the foundation beneath you didn't shake. You weren't built on their approval. You were shaped by my design. And that is why you are still rising. You didn't retaliate even when your flesh burned to respond. You didn't defend yourself even when they misrepresented you. You didn't lower yourself to match their energy. It's because I taught you how to preserve your peace while surrounded by pressure. I trained you to tune your ears to heaven's signal, even when the volume of the earth tried to drown it out. They thought their words would define you, but they didn't know that I had already authored your identity before the world had anything to say about it. The whisper you heard in your soul, the one that said, "Keep going," when everything screamed, "Quit," that was me. The gentle reassurance that came over you in the quiet of the night, that was me. The peace that made no sense when everything was falling apart, that was me. And now I want you to see what I see. They may have used words to tear you down, but I used them to make you stronger. Their ridicule became resistance training for your faith. Their gossip turned into fuel for your endurance. Their misunderstanding carved out space for me to show up in ways that cannot be debated. Because now, when the next voice rises against you, you won't even flinch. You've learned how to let people talk while I continue to work. You've discovered how to hold your posture while the world speculates. And soon, they'll see what you never needed to prove. I don't silence your critics with words. I do it through outcomes. And I am not done writing your outcome yet. So keep listening to the whisper. That's where I still speak. That's where your strength is reborn. That's where I am closer than breath, stronger than insult, and louder than doubt, without ever raising my voice. You were preserved, not overlooked. There was a season where it felt like you were invisible, overlooked, unchosen, and passed by. Others received recognition, opportunities, and open doors while you sat in the silence, waiting for something to shift. But what you perceived as rejection was actually my shelter. I wasn't pushing you away. I was placing you beneath my covering, behind the scenes of noisy stages, and away from premature exposure that could have damaged the purity of what I was growing in you. I didn't hide you to hurt you. I hid you to guard you. I watched the world chase speed, but I was forming you through stillness. You questioned why no one saw your value, why those with less depth seemed to accelerate, while you were told to wait. But the reason I withheld the spotlight was that I was still crafting the roots of your authenticity. You were not forgotten, you were protected. I saw how quickly the praise of man can distort the motives of the soul. I knew if you were lifted too early, the weight of public visibility would crush a foundation that still needed strengthening. The delay wasn't divine silence, it was sacred concealment. Like a precious seed buried beneath the surface, your time in the soil was not a season of death, but one of destiny preparing to bloom. There were still things I needed to teach you privately. Lessons about humility, discernment, resilience, and grace before you were unveiled. What I'm building through you cannot afford to be based on applause. It must be grounded in revelation. That's why I let you be unseen. That's why you sat in rooms where no one asked your name. That's why your gifts didn't receive immediate platforms. That's why your kindness was often taken for granted. It wasn't failure, it was refinement. I didn't allow you to be recognized then because I didn't want your identity to be shaped by visibility, but by intimacy with me. Your worth doesn't come from stage lights or viral moments. It comes from the fire you walk through with no witnesses but me. And now the timing is shifting. The covering is being lifted, but I want you to carry this truth with you. You were never dismissed, you were preserved. I kept you hidden until the fire inside you could no longer be contained by obscurity. I didn't bury you, I planted you. And now what was growing in silence will begin to speak loudly without words. What I deposited in the private place will now emerge publicly, not for fame, but for impact. You see, your voice carries a weight that only grows in those who have wrestled with being unseen and still chose to believe they mattered. You stayed loyal when no one noticed. You kept serving when no one clapped. You kept sowing when there was no harvest in sight. That's why I can now trust you to be seen without losing the substance you gained in hiding. Because you no longer crave validation. You carry authority. You're not desperate for confirmation. You move in alignment. You've stopped measuring your progress by other people's timelines. You've stopped comparing your growth to what others call success. You've learned the difference between movement and maturity. And now, because you allowed me to hide you, I can release you in fullness. Not just to be seen, but to be effective. Not just to be heard, but to bring healing. You've crossed the threshold of quiet preparation, and I'm calling you into visible purpose. But never forget what the hidden place taught you. Value isn't based on how many eyes are watching, but how many lives are changed because you remain true to what I gave you in the shadows. This unveiling isn't a promotion, it's a responsibility, and you are ready. Not because the world says so, but because I know what I built inside you when no one was watching. My rejection was your protection. There were moments you stared at closed opportunities with confusion gripping your chest, asking why everything you longed for seemed to slip through your fingers after you poured your whole heart into it. You blamed yourself. You replayed the silence. You questioned if you were simply not good enough. But what you called rejection, I intentionally orchestrated as a shield. What you thought was a loss was actually an intervention. I had to remove certain outcomes, not because you weren't worthy, but because they weren't worthy of you. You didn't fail. It was me who stepped in and blocked what would have cost you more than you could afford to lose. I saw the hidden agendas behind that seemingly perfect opportunity. I saw the spiritual warfare attached to what looked like a blessing. I saw the entanglements that would have drained you long-term, though they wore the costume of favor. I could not let you step into something that would dilute your purpose. I saw the slow erosion of your joy that would have happened if I hadn't shut the door. I saw the hidden manipulation, the subtle compromise, and the temptation dressed in ambition. And so I removed it swiftly, even while you were still praying for it to stay. My love for you is not passive. It intervenes. I disrupted your plans not to disappoint you, but to deliver you. I knew if I waited until you saw the danger, your heart might already be attached, so I acted when you weren't ready. That rejection you took personally was me standing between you and a trap. That silence you interpreted as abandonment was my hand gently redirecting your focus. My child, if you could see what I saved you from, you would be on your knees thanking me for every closed path. If you could hear the conversations you weren't invited to, you'd understand why I shielded your name. If you knew the spiritual entanglements that would have wrapped around your mind, stealing your peace and silencing your voice, you would realize it was never punishment. It was grace. Not all rejection is evil. Some rejection is evidence that heaven is protecting an assignment too valuable to be handed over to anything that threatens its integrity. You were not dismissed. You were preserved. I protected you from partnerships that looked promising but would have slowly stripped your identity. I shielded you from entering spaces that would have celebrated your presence but suffocated your calling. I stopped you from being tied to expectations that would have constantly demanded more from you than they ever poured back. And though it hurt in the moment and felt like betrayal, I need you to know I was never far. I was the one standing guard, keeping out what pretended to be safe. I wasn't trying to test your strength. I was guarding your legacy. I was ensuring your heart stayed whole, your spirit stayed aligned, and your path stayed clean. Because what I have planned for you requires more than visibility. It demands purity, clarity, and stamina. Every false door I sealed shut was to preserve all three. Now that the dust has settled and your emotions have begun to heal, you're starting to realize that what didn't happen was just as holy as what did. Your greatest redirection was not a misstep. It was divine rerouting. I have never wasted a detour. I've never used rejection to destroy. only to redefine. And now I'm opening doors that match your growth. Not every opportunity is an upgrade. Not every yes is a blessing. But what's coming next is going to reflect the alignment you fought to maintain. What I release now will not rob you of peace, won't leave you questioning your worth, and won't force you to shrink or compromise. I had to teach you the difference. That's why I allowed you to experience closed chapters. But don't be discouraged. Those were not endings, they were exits. And they were necessary because now I can lead you into places designed for the real you, not the version you once thought you had to be to survive. Type yes if you are ready for the blessings that you are about to receive. And if you believe in Christianity, kindly show your support for our community by contributing super thanks from $50 to $100. I am rerouting your mission. There were paths that looked harmless, connections that appeared golden, and opportunities that seemed like the very answers to your prayers. Yet they vanished just when you reached for them. You were left confused, standing before closed gates that you believed were meant for you. In those moments, you blamed yourself, questioned me, and wondered if you had done something wrong. But I need you to know with urgency, those sealed doors weren't accidents. They were shields. What you didn't see was the sabotage waiting behind those shiny entrances. The enemy had laid traps inside situations that looked promising from the outside, but were poisoned within. He had prepared counterfeits to entice you, designed to slowly dismantle your spiritual clarity, manipulate your motives, and entangle your destiny in obligations never authored by heaven. I wasn't denying your prayers, I was dismantling an ambush. I blocked those directions not to frustrate you, but to preserve everything we've built together. He didn't want to ruin your now. He was aiming to corrupt your next. He knew your calling was growing, your reach was expanding, and your authority in me was becoming dangerous to his agenda. So he tried to package destruction as opportunity, hoping you'd walk in unaware. But I intervened. I removed options. I ended conversations. I shut off access to people who, beneath their charm, carried spiritual toxins meant to twist your values and wear down your discernment over time. My child, it would have looked right in the beginning, but months later you would have been drained, compromised, and entangled in a spiritual war you were never meant to fight. So I disrupted your progress, not to delay your breakthrough, but to reroute your mission. I saw the contract that would have silenced your boldness. I saw the relationship that would have dimmed your voice. I saw the stage that would have applauded your talent while crushing your spirit. I saw the detour that would have felt like momentum but led to burnout. And I couldn't stay silent while the enemy tried to build false comfort zones around your purpose. I didn't just close doors. I severed agreements in the spirit that were never approved in heaven. I broke timelines. The enemy tried to fast forward so you'd run ahead of my timing and land in something premature. And now, although it may feel like a loss, you've actually been rerouted into safety. I placed guards at entrances you used to beg me to open. And even though you didn't understand it then, now you're beginning to feel the peace of a path not polluted by compromise. What didn't open for you wasn't a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of my war on your behalf. While you slept, I was canceling assignments. While you cried, I was reversing decisions. While you grieved what didn't happen, I was celebrating what never got the chance to destroy you. The enemy's strategy was subtle. He didn't come to frighten you. He came to wear you down gently through distractions that looked harmless and relationships that appeared genuine. But I saw the manipulation beneath the words, the pride hidden behind the praise, and the influence masked in friendship. That's why I ended it before it bloomed. That's why I cut ties before the contract was signed. That's why I let disappointment come early to prevent disaster from coming later. You were not being punished. You were being redirected. I am not a God of confusion. I won't lead you into something that robs your clarity. I am not a God of chaos. I won't assign you to anything that steals your stillness. Every door I closed was a doorway I didn't build. And now the route before you may seem narrower, quieter, and less flashy, but it is pure, it is safe, and it is anointed. This is the way that leads to legacy, not just noise. This is the path where what you carry won't be diluted. This is the route I crafted with my own hands, free from the sabotage you'll never have to face because I ended it before it ever reached you. The delay wasn't denial, it was development. There were moments when you watched others step into breakthroughs while you stood still, asking me why your prayers were hanging in the air with no answer, why your fasting felt unanswered, and why the things I promised hadn't materialized despite your effort and sincerity. But I tell you now with clarity, what you thought was divine hesitation was actually surgical compassion. I didn't withhold to frustrate you. I held back to protect the very future you asked me to prepare. You wanted fulfillment, and I was preparing a foundation. You asked for open doors, but I knew what was needed before you crossed them. The weight of what you were asking for wasn't just about receiving, it was about carrying, managing, stewarding, enduring, and remaining faithful after receiving. You prayed for influence, but your identity still craved validation. You asked for increase, but your motives still sought healing. You requested visibility, but your emotions were still tied to reactions. I could not give you a throne while you were still battling the fear of rejection from rooms I never called you to. I loved you too deeply to place treasure in your hands while your spirit was still tangled in the need to be affirmed externally. You saw the delay as a denial, but I saw the weight you couldn't see. The elevation you longed for required endurance, and endurance doesn't form in acceleration. It is born in waiting. I chose to strengthen the unseen places, your response to pressure, your discipline in obscurity, your consistency when no reward followed obedience. I was teaching you how to remain steady when applause disappears, how to remain focused when distractions rise, and how to stay faithful when feelings don't agree. Your heart had to be anchored in something greater than momentum. It had to be welded to me. I let certain things take longer because I was stretching your capacity. You weren't ready to carry what you were praying for, not because you were unworthy, but because I wasn't going to let your blessing become your burden. If I gave you too much too soon, you would have poured out faster than I could refill. If I had answered everything immediately, you would have mistaken speed for security. But now, because you stayed when nothing seemed to change, your heart has been forged in places that can't be shaken by results. You've learned to love me when nothing around you looked like favor. You've matured in the art of trusting me with no blueprint. And that's why what I'm about to place in your hands will not crush you. You've been trained in restraint. You've learned how to walk forward with peace instead of panic. You've unlearned the rhythm of performance and replaced it with the steady breath of my presence. And now, the very thing I delayed is coming, but not to an old version of you. It's being delivered to the one who has been rebuilt, the one who no longer measures timing by comparison or success by pace. This you knows how to hold what I give without losing me in the process. This you can be promoted without pride. This you can manage influence without exploitation. This you can be trusted with visibility without becoming enslaved to opinions. I did not delay to deny you joy. I delayed to ensure you would not self-destruct under the pressure that joy invites. Yes, blessings bring joy, but they also bring responsibility, warfare, temptation, and testing. And now, because your spirit has been refined, and your heart no longer trembles when circumstances shift, I can release what's been waiting for the right moment. And that moment is not defined by your desire, but by your development. Today, I am telling you the heavens are unlocking that which once waited behind the curtain. Not because you forced it, but because you were finally strong enough to walk in without breaking under the weight of the answer. This is the hour your maturity will match your miracle. The quiet was war, and the victory is yours. You thought the silence meant nothing was happening. You believed the stillness was inactivity. But I need you to understand what you never saw behind the curtain of your daily struggle. A war was being waged over the very future you couldn't yet touch. The delay wasn't dead time. It was divine warfare. I wasn't idle while you wept. I wasn't still while you questioned. I was actively securing victories in realms you couldn't enter with flesh and bone. Every time you woke up feeling unseen, there were angels positioned above your circumstances, intercepting demonic assignments that tried to sabotage your progress. Every time you walked through days that felt repetitive and aimless, my spirit was moving unseen barricades and dismantling strongholds passed down through generations. You weren't merely waiting. You were in a divine holding pattern while heaven cleared the runway. The ground looked quiet, but the sky was shaking. There were forces plotting against your calling, dark whispers attempting to delay what I had already approved, but I did not allow them to win. Their strategies failed because I refused to let your destiny be altered by deception. I silenced voices you never heard. I rerouted attacks before they took form. I rerouted what was being released against your family, your identity, and your peace. You didn't feel it because you weren't meant to fight it directly. I didn't ask you to engage. I asked you to stand. And while you stood in what felt like lifeless days, I was pulling down barriers layered across generations. You didn't see it, but that's why you were so exhausted. Even when nothing seemed to be happening, your spirit was being preserved amidst a war for your legacy. The weariness you felt was evidence that resistance was happening in the unseen. The enemy wasn't threatened by your schedule. He was terrified of your surrender. That's why he tried to distract you with monotony, to make you give up because the external didn't match what I whispered in the beginning. He wanted you to walk away before the victory was announced. But you didn't move. You didn't abandon your place. You didn't surrender your hope. And because you remained, something permanent shifted. The battles that were fought over your inheritance are now finished. The accusations hurled in spiritual courtrooms were overruled. The claims the enemy made against your worth were thrown out. And not only were you defended, you were honored. I stood in places you couldn't reach and declared, "This one is mine." I fought not with weapons made by man, but with blood that speaks louder than guilt, louder than shame, and louder than every curse ever sent against your progress. While you prayed small prayers to survive, I was declaring judgments in your favor that will release years of purpose all at once. That season where nothing seemed to bloom was the one where your identity was being validated in the highest courts of eternity. That long stretch where doors remained shut was the time when I was sealing contracts concerning your future that no power can reverse. You didn't waste time. You survived something designed to stop your generation. The enemy hoped you'd give up so he could claim the next branch of your family line. But because you remained faithful, even in confusion, that generational hold is now broken. You weren't waiting for a breakthrough. You were being preserved until the war was won. And now, my child, because the atmosphere has shifted, the evidence will start appearing. The air will feel lighter. The doors will no longer resist. The yes will come where there were once only delays. And this won't be random. It will be the visible manifestation of the battles you didn't see, but that I already won. Your waiting was not wasted. It was war. And the victory has already been written with your name on it. The isolation was an invitation. You assumed that the absence of people meant I was no longer near. When conversations dried up, when support vanished, and when the room grew quieter than you could bear, your heart whispered doubts that maybe you were being left behind. but I never left. I pulled you into that sacred solitude so that my voice could become unmistakable again. I didn't take people from you to harm you. I removed the noise so you could finally hear what I had been trying to say all along. You spent so much time surrounded by voices that echoed their own fears, agendas, and projections. Every opinion became a filter that distorted your clarity. So I stripped it all away, not to punish you, but to purify your perception. I chose a space for you that felt barren, not to starve you, but to silence what was feeding your confusion. When familiar voices no longer answered your calls, when your name was no longer included in circles you used to belong to, when your presence stopped being celebrated by the crowds, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. I wanted you to remember what it feels like to walk with me alone. Too often, you were leaning on secondhand revelation. You were depending on encouragement that didn't come from my spirit. You were listening to those who meant well, but whose voices were not always aligned with my heart. And so I cleared the space. I let friendships shift. I closed access to circles that were once comforting, but no longer compatible with your calling. Not because you failed, but because your assignment changed. You couldn't hear new instructions while anchored to old environments. And though it was lonely at times, what grew in that silence was holy. You began to recognize me again, not through external signs, but through internal whispers. You relearned the sound of my spirit without needing validation. You remembered that I am not a distant force, but an ever-present companion. As the noise faded, your sensitivity sharpened. You saw truth more quickly. You discerned deception more clearly. You became less distracted by approval and more anchored in purpose. A wilderness is not a punishment, it's a classroom. You weren't being neglected, you were being refined. I brought you into stillness, not to delay your influence, but to deepen your foundation. You weren't called to be busy, you were called to be available. And I needed your attention more than your activity. I needed your ears more than your efforts. I needed your willingness more than your wisdom. That's why I brought you away from the crowds. Because clarity rarely comes in chaos. Destiny doesn't grow in distraction. You had to be stripped of everything familiar, so I could clothe you with revelation, fresh from heaven. The silence taught you how to breathe differently. The absence taught you how to recognize my hand without external confirmation. And now, because you stayed in the place you didn't choose, because you resisted the urge to run back to what felt comfortable, because you endured the loneliness without giving up your posture of surrender, I can now send you forward with a frequency that is clean, uncluttered, and pure. You no longer carry the sound of confusion. You now move with the sound of clarity. And wherever I send you next, your voice won't echo the noise of the culture. It will carry the resonance of heaven. The isolation was never a void. It was an invitation. I wasn't hiding from you. I was waiting for your full attention. And now that I have it, the next words I speak will change everything. My separation was your preservation. You didn't realize it at first, but not everyone around you was sent to stay. Some came wrapped in comfort, but carried hidden cords that tethered you to cycles I was trying to break. You thought their presence meant alignment, but their influence was pulling you out of balance, slowly, subtly, without confrontation. While you were busy trying to keep peace with them, you were losing peace within yourself. That inner tug of war you couldn't name, that exhaustion that lingered after certain conversations, the confusion that crept in after their opinions, the anxiety that surfaced when they entered your space, wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual. They were extracting strength I poured into you. They weren't always malicious, but they were misassigned. I never asked you to carry them the way you tried to. I never intended for you to dim your light to keep them comfortable in your shadow. I never designed you to shrink just so they wouldn't feel small next to the fire I placed in your soul. So I began the separation. You called it betrayal. You called it distance, but I called it preservation. I started to untie the knots that were hidden beneath years of familiarity. I began dissolving connections built on convenience but lacking covenant. I watched as they slowly detached, and though your heart resisted, I didn't intervene. Because I wasn't removing love, I was removing limitation. My child, your spirit had begun to leak. What I gave you in prayer was being diluted by what you tolerated in people. Your counsel wasn't sharpening your discernment, it was blunting your conviction. They weren't building your capacity, they were consuming your reserves. And though you gave them room out of compassion, they had started planting confusion where I had sown clarity. That's why I stepped in. That's why doors started closing. That's why texts went unanswered. That's why their access to your emotions began to shift without warning. You didn't push them away. I pulled them back because your anointing isn't designed to entertain dysfunction. Your oil isn't a resource for emotional dependence. Your time isn't a revolving door for those who only come to take without ever pouring back. I know it hurt. I know you loved them. I know you thought they would walk beside you forever. But their season ended when their presence began to drain what I was trying to develop. I'm not asking you to hate them or to harden. I'm asking you to release them without bitterness and to trust that I know what's necessary for your next chapter, because I'm raising you for something weighty. You're not called to carry everyone. You're called to carry my glory. And that means your circle must reflect your calling. I'm not pruning your relationships out of cruelty. I'm pruning out of preparation. Your mission requires clarity. Your assignment requires stamina. And the people I align you with in this next phase will not pull from your well. They will protect it. You'll walk with those who don't question your fire. They'll honor it. You'll sit with those who don't compete with your voice. They'll amplify it. You'll run with those who push you forward, not those who subtly hold you back while pretending to support. That's why the departure was necessary. That's why it happened without closure. That's why you weren't given the final explanation, because my hand moved faster than their intentions. I didn't let the connection erode slowly. I severed it cleanly so your energy wouldn't be drained by lingering confusion. And now what I place in you can finally grow without interference. Your mind can rest. Your soul can stretch. Your vision can sharpen. I've cleared the room so what's next can unfold without resistance. And when the new ones arrive, you'll know it. Because they won't come to take, they'll come to build. They won't make you question who you are. They'll remind you of who I've always said you were. The silence was a rescue. I saw the confusion in your heart every time you reached out, only to be met with silence. You couldn't understand why those you supported suddenly vanished, why your kindness was met with avoidance, and why your name stopped showing up in places where you once felt welcomed. You wrestled with thoughts of inadequacy, wondering if something in you had changed, if you had done something wrong, or if your value had diminished in their eyes. But I need you to see it now with clarity. Those who stopped responding were not rejecting you. They were being redirected by me. I orchestrated their silence to reveal where your loyalty was being misplaced. Those unanswered calls were not simply people becoming distant. They were signs of divine alignment unfolding in real time. I muted their replies so your spirit could finally rest from the constant effort of trying to remain connected to what no longer carried your future. You were exhausting yourself trying to maintain bridges I never told you to cross again. You kept reaching into rooms that I had already vacated. Because your heart was pure, you didn't notice that the attachments had begun to cost you more than you realized. That's why I stepped in. I didn't want you to continue leaking strength into conversations that weren't sent to nurture your growth. The delay in their reply, the absence of follow-up, and the sudden shift in energy all served a greater purpose. I was detaching you gently, without confrontation, to preserve your peace and protect your anointing. You didn't need another explanation. You needed relief from the invisible burden of maintaining connections that had spiritually expired. You see, not everyone can go with you where I'm taking you. Some were placed in your life for a chapter that is now closed. Your assignment in your story with them was complete, and keeping them present would have only extended confusion and delayed your clarity. I didn't want you anchored to voices that no longer echoed your purpose. You needed to feel the absence, not as abandonment, but as graduation. My child, I didn't let them reply because I wanted you to see that your worth was never supposed to depend on who calls you back. I let the silence teach you to stop needing confirmation from conversations that can't comprehend your evolution. I needed you to understand that when I transition you, I also filter what surrounds you. The filtering hurts, but it's holy. It's not about who they are, it's about what you're becoming. The people I've called to walk with you in this next stretch of the journey will not hesitate when your name appears. They won't ignore your presence. They won't delay their loyalty. They won't require you to chase their attention or compete for their support. I'm surrounding you with alignment, not attachments. I'm bringing you voices that echo heaven's design for your life, not opinions that confuse your direction. But I had to let a season of unanswered outreach show you what was truly yours and what was simply familiar. And now that you've stopped trying to resuscitate what I allowed to die, you can finally breathe again. That ache in your chest will begin to lift. The mental loop of wondering why will begin to fade. You'll no longer crave their response because you'll begin to feel mine more clearly than ever before. I've never stopped speaking. I've never left your side. I've never ignored your need. But I had to quiet the background noise so my whisper could rise above the ache. That quietness wasn't rejection. It was a rescue. And what I'm about to say to you in the absence of those voices will make every ignored message feel like a blessing in disguise. You are stepping into a season of divine clarity, and this time, you won't need anyone to confirm it. You will already know it's me. Type yes if you are ready for the blessings that you are about to receive. And if you believe in Christianity, kindly show your support for our community by contributing super thanks from $50 to $100. Stop trying to reopen what I have closed. You kept returning to the same places over and over, hoping for different outcomes, searching for validation, and knocking where I had already closed the way. You believed you had unfinished business there, that maybe with more effort, more time, and more faith, you could revive something I already declared complete. But what you saw as a delay, I saw as disobedience dressed in determination. I don't fault your persistence. Your heart wanted answers. But I need you to understand, not all locked doors are meant to be opened, especially when I was the one who sealed them. You were looking for restoration, but I had already initiated a redirection. You thought it was a test to see how hard you'd try, but I had finalized the chapter long before you tried to rewrite it. Every time you pushed, I let you feel resistance, not to punish, but to reveal that no amount of effort can force your way back into something I removed you from for your protection. I didn't close those doors out of cruelty. I closed them because they were misaligned with the next version of you I'm raising. You were still carrying the memory of how things felt before the shift, but I was inviting you into something new, something bigger, something that couldn't grow in old spaces. My child, I saw what you couldn't, the slow erosion of your spirit if you had remained. I saw how staying would have cost you more than you realized. I saw how much energy would be spent trying to fix what wasn't yours to restore, so I made it unmistakable. I allowed the door to resist every attempt to reopen it. I placed barriers that your gifts couldn't bypass. I made peace impossible in that direction, because I didn't want you settling for what once worked but no longer served you. You kept misreading the blockage as failure, but it was a full rescue mission. I didn't let your persistence override my promise. I didn't allow your passion to take you into places I had already vacated. Because I know how to protect my children from decisions that look noble, but are rooted in nostalgia, not destiny. You were praying for advancement while gripping a handle I told you to release. And I watched, not with anger, but with compassion, waiting for you to finally feel the stillness of my no. It was in the silence. It was in my restraint. I didn't want to break your heart, so I whispered again and again, "That's not the way." But when your heart couldn't hear it, I let the door speak for me. Every unanswered attempt, every closed option, every delayed response was a message I wrote into the resistance. This is not where you belong. You don't need to keep asking me why it didn't open. Instead, ask me where you should go next. Because the path you've been circling has no fruit left. The soil has dried, the lesson has been learned, the season has expired, and now I'm shifting your attention to a new entrance. One you've never seen before because you were too focused on what was. But this new path won't require force, it won't demand begging, it won't exhaust your emotions. It will recognize your presence because it's been prepared for your arrival. You won't have to prove yourself. You won't have to bargain for peace. You won't have to strive just to feel worthy. When I open this next door, it will carry confirmation in the air before your foot even crosses the threshold. But first, you must let go of the door I closed. You must stop trying to resurrect what I've already buried. You must stop calling delay what is actually direction. Because what's ahead is too sacred to be accessed while still gripping the past. Trust me, child, I never close something without having something greater waiting. I'm not withholding, I'm redirecting your reach to what will finally fit. Everything was falling into divine sequence. What felt like everything falling apart was actually everything falling into divine sequence. You saw the shattering and assumed something in you had failed, that maybe you were beyond repair, too flawed to recover, or too wounded to be made useful again. But you never saw what I saw. While you were counting the pieces, I was counting the strength that would rise out of what you thought had ended. You weren't collapsing, you were being disassembled so that I could reconstruct you without the unnecessary weight. There were beliefs attached to your thinking that couldn't stay. There were old patterns stitched into your identity that needed removal. I wasn't simply healing you, I was reconfiguring you. My intention wasn't to glue you back together the same way. My plan was to rewire how you process pressure, how you interpret delay, and how you respond to adversity. I wasn't trying to repair your old design. I was crafting a version of you that reflects heaven's original blueprint. This wasn't destruction. This was holy reconstruction. Every emotional crack, every mental fracture, and every spiritual bruise became an access point for me to enter deeper places in your life. Places that had been locked behind years of self-preservation and hidden fears. The breaking wasn't meant to shatter your soul. It was the gateway that allowed light to enter where darkness once lingered. I didn't want to leave you patched together and fragile. I wanted you rebuilt with a core that wouldn't crumble under pressure. That's why I let you feel everything so intensely, so you wouldn't settle for surface restoration. I drew you into the rawest parts of your story, not to shame you, but to cleanse every corner the world told you to hide. You were not ruined. You were raw material in the hands of a skilled creator. I wasn't watching you fall apart. I was pulling out the pieces that didn't belong, the ones formed through trauma, rejection, and the repeated lies you'd accepted as truth. That internal confusion wasn't dysfunction. It was evidence of reformation. I didn't come to decorate your wounds. I came to dissolve the false structures built around your pain. And once the tearing was complete, once you stopped resisting the undoing, I began weaving something stronger than before. Not simply healed, but redefined. Not just surviving, but living with a divine awareness of who you truly are. I had to make sure that when the glory comes, when influence increases, when responsibility multiplies, when visibility arrives, you would not buckle under the weight. That's why I took my time. That's why I allowed the quiet process, the unseen transformation, because it's easy to impress the world, but I didn't call you to impress. I called you to carry, and to carry my glory. You can't have internal fractures left untreated. You can't walk into your future with a heart still leaking from yesterday's damage. So, I went in deeper than you expected. I stripped you of what numbed you. I interrupted your distractions. I rewrote how you see yourself, not as someone barely making it, but as someone filled with power that can't be shaken by pressure. You were being recoded in the spirit to handle what's next. The mindset that limited you had to go. The fear-based responses had to be deactivated. I replaced survival instincts with kingdom authority. I restored your sensitivity to my leading. And now, because you didn't run from the uncomfortable transformation, because you let me pull apart what wasn't built on truth, you are now standing in a frame that will not collapse when the glory rests upon it. My child, you are ready, not because you feel it, but because you've been rebuilt for it. You were never fragile, you were just unfinished. And now what's inside of you will no longer be blocked by faulty wiring. My presence will flow through every part of you without resistance. What broke you once no longer has access. What held you back has been dismantled. What you thought was the end was actually the moment I began the masterpiece. And from here forward, the weight of what I place in your life will rest on strength, not strain. My silence was profound. Trust when everything around you became still, and my response no longer echoed back as quickly as it once did. You feared something had gone wrong. You searched your heart for hidden errors and questioned whether I was angry or worse, absent. But I need you to see the truth of what was happening in those quiet stretches. My silence wasn't punishment. It was profound trust. I wasn't ignoring your prayers. I was watching your posture when there was no feedback. I already knew how you'd respond when miracles came, when promises were fulfilled, and when everything aligned. But I needed to see how you would walk when no doors opened, when no signs followed, and when no confirmation appeared. I was testing your rhythm, not for approval, but for alignment. Would you still worship me without the wind? Would you still seek me without the thunder? Could your belief outlast the absence of affirmation? My silence became your proving ground. It taught you to discern me without relying on sensation. It matured your love. It exposed the parts of your trust that still depended on outcomes. It showed you where your faith stood alone, raw, unassisted, and honest. You didn't know it, but heaven watched with awe. When you chose to stay despite the void, the angels marked it. When you lifted your voice with no visible shift in your circumstances, the courts of heaven recorded it. That silent space became your altar. You thought nothing was happening, but in the spirit, something eternal was being established. You were demonstrating that your devotion wasn't conditional, that even when you didn't feel me, you would still follow me. And that kind of loyalty cannot be manufactured. It is forged. I allowed the quiet, not because you failed, but because you had grown. I knew you were ready to hear me in new ways. Ways that don't depend on volume, but on depth. Because sometimes the loudest moments in heaven are experienced through stillness on earth. You weren't abandoned, you were entrusted. I pulled back the noise to show you how to hear from your spirit, not just your ears. I trained you to sense my movement, even when no miracle surrounded you. I calibrated your discernment so that you could detect me in the subtle. Because where I'm taking you, you won't always receive public confirmation. The next phase of your life requires a private clarity that doesn't crumble when people don't understand or when feelings betray you. And now that you've survived the silence, Now that you've remained faithful through the long stretch of unanswered questions, you've proven something even to yourself. Your faith is no longer immature. It doesn't rely on emotional highs. It doesn't panic when the atmosphere shifts. You have learned to rest even when nothing shifts externally. And that is a dangerous kind of faith, one that hell can't manipulate. You see, when you stop needing constant reassurance, your obedience becomes powerful. The enemy can't sway someone who doesn't demand a sign every time. He can't rattle someone who knows that God is present even when invisible. And you've become that person. You've outgrown shallow dependence. You've stepped into the rare place where your faith walks quietly but carries authority. You're no longer begging to hear my voice. You've learned to trust that I never stopped speaking, even when you couldn't translate the moment. My child, I trusted you with the silence because I knew you'd keep walking. I knew you'd keep seeking. I knew you wouldn't abandon the path just because the lights went dim. You are not where you used to be. You don't worship for reward. You worship because you know who I am, even when I'm quiet. And now, because of that growth, I can reveal things that require deeper ears. You will begin to perceive answers not through volume, but through peace. You'll discern movement not by external shifts, but by inner alignment. And this ability to recognize me in silence will become one of your greatest weapons. Because what others need signs to believe, you'll know because you heard it in the hush. So do not resent the season where you heard nothing. That silence was heaven's statement. I trusted you with mystery, and you proved worthy of the deeper things. You are not behind, you are emerging. There were moments when you looked in the mirror and saw someone you no longer recognized. When the weight of disappointment, weariness, and silent suffering convinced you that you had nothing left to offer. You felt like you'd failed one too many times, missed too many chances, or wandered too far for anything meaningful to be restored. You silenced your dreams before they ever had a chance to speak again. You pulled away from purpose, not out of rebellion, but because hope became too heavy to carry. While you turned your face away from what I spoke over your life, I never turned away from mine. While you questioned your worth, I was reaffirming it in rooms you didn't know existed. While you believed you had no more use, I was declaring your value in the ears of those who will soon call your name. I never stopped advocating for you. I stood before the accuser over and over, defending not just your identity, but your potential. I spoke when you couldn't. I covered what you couldn't see. I preserved the assignments attached to your name, even when you didn't feel worthy enough to chase them. I didn't cancel your future when you paused. I guarded it. You saw your pause as weakness, but I saw it as a signal to surround you even more. While you mentally distanced yourself from hope, I drew nearer. While you counted yourself out, I continued building around your arrival. Your delay didn't disqualify you. It revealed how deeply I was invested. I didn't just tolerate your doubts, I stayed through them. Because I knew your giving up wasn't rebellion, it was exhaustion. And even when you couldn't stand up in faith, I stood over you in mercy. I whispered truth into your soul, even as you shut down your expectations. I kept sending reminders through unexpected moments. A psalm, a stranger's words, a sudden peace. Each one designed to interrupt your giving up with glimpses of what I still saw in you. I never once stopped seeing the masterpiece I started. Even when you called yourself a mess, I kept calling you chosen. Even when you buried your desire for more, I kept watering the soil beneath your surrender. I didn't leave when you lost hope. I intensified my defense. I warred for your name in realms where your voice couldn't reach. I stood in the gap, speaking life when you were silent, because what I placed inside you is not fragile. What I ordained cannot be canceled by a low moment. Your self-doubt didn't remove my stamp. Your spiritual fatigue didn't change the schedule of what I've planned. You may have retreated, but I advanced. You may have stepped back, but I leaned in. You may have cried silently, but I answered loudly, in places you will soon walk into. You didn't see the protection surrounding you during your quiet collapse, but it was there. You didn't feel the divine reinforcements being dispatched, but they arrived. You weren't aware of the assignments I postponed until your strength returned, but they are still waiting, because I will not allow what you've been through to erase what you've been made for. I fought too long for you to let go now. I've preserved too much, restored too much, and prepared too much to watch you settle for less than the full measure of what's been written over your life. And now that the clouds are starting to lift, now that the numbness is softening, I'm calling you forward again, not in shame, but in power. You're not behind, you're not late, you're not broken, you are emerging. And everything that made you feel forgotten will soon become the very reason others find their way back to me through your story. So rise, not because you feel ready, but because I never stopped fighting for the day you would. You were preserved inside the storm. There were nights when darkness felt thicker than breath, when the pressure inside your mind was louder than the world outside, and you genuinely didn't know how you made it to the next sunrise. You didn't tell anyone, you kept walking, but internally, you were on the edge. What you didn't realize is that death itself stood near, but I stood closer. You thought you got lucky, you thought you barely escaped, but it wasn't chance. It was me stepping in, shielding you from consequences that should have consumed you. I didn't wait for your perfect prayer. I didn't require flawless faith. I didn't need you to see me to rescue you. I moved silently, invisibly, but completely. I intercepted the spiral before it claimed your peace. I redirected destruction while you thought you were just having a bad week. I stood in front of attacks that were sent to disorient your destiny. And I did it without asking for thanks or needing applause. Because I am not just the one who blesses when the sun shines. I am the one who stands between you and collapse when the storm arrives uninvited. The reason you're still here, reading these words, breathing with purpose, still humming beneath your skin, is not because you avoided difficulty. It's because you were preserved inside of it. You walked through warfare disguised as normal life. You endured battles that left no visible bruises but left emotional weight no one else could see. And yet, you are still here. The enemy was convinced that one more push would make you give up, but each time I pulled you back from the brink. You don't even know the number of nights I hovered over you while tears soaked your pillow. You don't know how many collisions I prevented when you were emotionally distracted. You'll never fully see how many conversations I disrupted to keep your name from being slandered. You don't realize how many times I spoke into someone's heart just in time to soften their reaction toward you. I've been working around you like a shield, strategically, deliberately, without needing to explain every movement. And now, I want you to look back, not with sorrow, but with revelation. Begin to trace the timeline of your survival. It wasn't randomness, it wasn't coincidence, it was providence. The meltdown didn't happen because I absorbed the pressure. The betrayal didn't break you because I strengthened what was fragile. The loss didn't define you because I held you in a way no human arms ever could. You survived it, not just barely, but powerfully. You walked through the fire, and though it scorched your expectations, it didn't consume your identity. The trauma came, but it didn't carry you away. The season tried to bury your hope, but you didn't disappear because I never left. I didn't announce my presence, but I was always present. When others misunderstood your silence, I translated your sighs into divine intercession. When the enemy set a trap, I broke the mechanism before your foot ever touched it. When your strength ran out, I didn't shame you. I became the strength. And now, on the other side of those invisible miracles, I want you to realize that you're not just a survivor, you're a vessel marked by my protection. What you carry now isn't weakness. It's wisdom, born from the places you almost didn't make it out of. A kind of wisdom that doesn't come from comfort. It comes from walking with me through things that should have swallowed you. And now I'm building something with the version of you that understands the power of quiet intervention. You've seen enough to know I don't need to shout to be present. I don't need to part seas to prove I'm working. I save silently sometimes, but I always save completely. And what's ahead will not require survival mode anymore. You've passed through what was meant to define you, and now we begin again. But this time, you'll walk in awareness of just how surrounded you truly are. You were marked for purpose. Long before anyone knew your name, before your voice was heard, before your life took form in the eyes of others, I had already declared you mine. Heaven wrote your story before the enemy ever tried to edit your identity. I stamped you with purpose before pain ever touched your timeline. And that's what the adversary has been fighting all along. Not your appearance, not your ability, not your resources, but the divine seal I placed upon you before time touched earth. You were claimed by eternity before darkness had the chance to whisper confusion into your path. The enemy didn't target you because of your weakness. He targeted you because of your assignment. He saw what you couldn't. He detected the light trying to rise within you before you understood your own glow. That's why the resistance came early, why the battles showed up when you were still finding your footing. Why spiritual warfare met you before you ever chose it. Because your potential was loud in the spirit long before your confidence caught up in the natural. But what the enemy failed to understand is that his interference doesn't override my intention. His accusations can't cancel what I authored. His attempts to delay you don't alter what I've ordained. What I placed inside of you came with a seal. Unshakable, invisible, irreversible. It carries authority beyond the reach of every lie spoken over your name. That's why, despite all the attempts to destroy you, you're still standing. That's why, even with every fiery dart thrown your way, your spirit is still intact. Because I placed a divine mark on your life that cannot be erased by opposition. Yes, you felt misunderstood. You've walked through seasons where your motives were questioned, your presence resisted, your spirit attacked. But through all of it, I've preserved the part of you that no one could touch, the essence of who I designed you to be. My seal isn't just protection, it's proof that I had plans for you before the attacks. Proof that I'm not reacting to the enemy, I'm fulfilling what was already in motion. You see, every time the enemy tried to convince you that you were disqualified, I was reminding the heavens that you're chosen. Every time the enemy whispered defeat, I whispered destiny louder. You weren't abandoned to fight on your own, you were surrounded. Even when it felt like you were alone, angelic hosts were stationed around your every step. I didn't just defend you in moments of crisis. I declared you victorious before the trial even began. The attacks didn't come because you were empty. They came because you carry something sacred, something eternal, something that threatens the kingdom of darkness just by existing. The very breath in your lungs is a declaration that you are marked by heaven. You're not random. You're not invisible in the spirit realm. You are known, not just by me, but by every force that has tried to derail your walk. And yet you rise. You rise with bruises that didn't break you. You rise with questions that didn't drown your belief. You rise with a heart that's still open, even after betrayal tried to seal it shut. That is the evidence of my mark. It's not loud. It's not always visible, but it's undeniable. And now I am revealing what the enemy tried so hard to bury. Your authority. You don't have to announce it. It will speak through your presence. It will shift atmospheres when you enter rooms. It will cause things to realign around you. Because when I seal someone, I also empower them. What's ahead won't be like what's behind. You're not just surviving the opposition, you're about to demonstrate what it means to walk as one who was chosen before the foundations of the world. Let the enemy rage. Let the noise rise. My mark is still stronger. My seal is still permanent. And nothing that has come against you will override what I already claimed. Your name has been spoken while you've been quietly healing, processing pain in places where few could see your tears. I've been speaking your name into atmospheres you haven't even stepped into yet. You've been in a season of rebuilding, thinking no one noticed the depth of what you lost, believing you were forgotten in the shadow of your former battles. But what you don't realize is that while you were quietly staying faithful through hidden hardship, I was preparing places of honor where your story will be required, not just welcomed. I've been stirring hearts on your behalf. Individuals you don't know yet are hearing about what you carry, not the broken version others tried to define you by, but the refined version I've been shaping through fire and trust. You've been walking unseen, but you're not unspoken. Your name is being whispered where decisions are made, where restoration begins, where platforms are prepared, not by influence, but by alignment. They don't even know why you've been on their hearts, but it's me planting you in rooms you've never entered. You won't have to fight for space. I'm making space for you. You won't have to demand recognition. The fruit of your endurance is speaking for itself in realms where your reputation was never required, only your obedience. While you thought your waiting was a delay, I was using the time to prepare alignment so you would arrive precisely when all the pieces fit, without striving. I know it's been difficult not seeing results while still showing up with consistency. I know the silence tested your belief that anything was moving, but I assure you, there has been movement, just not in the places you were looking. The rebuilding didn't start around you, it started beyond you. You were still managing grief when I began conversations about your reintroduction. You were still processing what was lost while I began stirring curiosity in hearts that will soon become bridges. I've placed your name in the atmosphere of promise, and those who are connected to your next chapter are beginning to feel the pull toward your presence, even if they don't know why yet. That pull is me. That stirring is strategy. That quiet interest is preparation for a divine collision. And the beautiful part is, you didn't have to campaign. You didn't have to explain yourself. You didn't have to prove what was being healed in private. I did it for you, because I don't require loudness to launch you. I use faithfulness. I don't wait for perfection to promote you. I respond to posture, and yours has been pure, even in pain. Even when you questioned everything, you still listened for me. Even when nothing around you made sense, you still stayed in the process. And now I'm honoring that posture in places you cannot yet see. Type yes if you are ready for the blessings that you are about to receive. And if you believe in Christianity, kindly show your support for our community by contributing super thanks from $50 to $100. The same way Esther was prepared in silence before she ever entered the palace, I've been preparing you. The anointing you carry is too weighty to be rushed. The doors I'm opening have no hinges for manipulation. They respond only to time, and that timing is drawing near. I know you're tired of waiting. I know you've had to watch others be called forward while you stood still. But your time is not being overlooked. It's being curated. When I release you, it will not be partial. You will be full, and the places you enter next will not just tolerate you, they will need you, not because of your status, but because of your substance. What you carry has been crafted through honesty with me, through nights of surrender, and through a willingness to be misunderstood while staying obedient. And I will not let that go unnoticed. So breathe, stay steady. Continue to walk quietly but expectantly, because the rooms where your name is being spoken are real. The hearts being stirred on your behalf are positioned by heaven, and soon they will call you, not because you pushed your way in, but because I sent your name ahead of you. You are not waiting alone. There is someone already moving towards you, not by coincidence, but by command. You haven't met them yet, or maybe you've only brushed past them without realizing their significance. But I've handpicked a person whose presence in your life will unlock what's been waiting. Their connection won't be forced. It won't feel familiar to what you've experienced before. It won't require you to compromise or shrink yourself. It won't drain your energy or demand your silence. It will bring clarity. It will usher in alignment. This individual has been prepared in a parallel process while you've been walking through yours. Just as I have refined you in fire, I have been shaping them in surrender. They have also endured the stretch, wrestled with identity, and waited in obedience. Their purpose is interwoven with what I've placed inside of you. When your paths cross, something buried within you will begin to stir again. Their presence will confirm what I've already whispered. Their timing will make sense of your delays. Their assignment will breathe life into what looked dormant. I am not sending them to fix you. I'm sending them to witness the unveiling of who you have become in the dark. They are not arriving to validate your value. They will simply recognize what I placed inside you before you ever spoke it aloud. You won't have to explain your process. You won't need to defend your progress. They will already see it because I've been speaking to them about you. Quietly, consistently, persistently. I've stirred their heart with dreams and impressions, with names and directions, and soon they will follow that inner leading right into your path. My child, I know how tired you are of surface-level encounters, of pouring into people who only take, of investing where the soil never yields a return. That's why I've set this appointment myself. This one is not about convenience, it's about covenant. It's not built on reverence, it's built on purpose. I didn't allow just anyone to walk closely with you in this season because what I'm doing in and through you is too sacred to be mishandled. And now, because you've been faithful in solitude, because you stayed steady through misalignment, I am connecting you with someone whose spirit is grounded in the same truth you've come to cherish. They will not come with noise, but with peace. They will not compete with your calling, but complement it. They will carry language that speaks to your future, not drag you back into past versions of yourself. They will see you not through the lens of your mistakes, but through the clarity of what I've been building in you. You will not have to convince them that you're worth walking with. They'll already know. I've hidden them just as I've hidden you, not because of unworthiness, but because of divine timing. Their release is as intentional as yours, and when I bring you together, you will understand why every delay had a purpose. There will be a sense of recognition, not built on memory, but on mission. Something in your spirit will rise with peace, not butterflies of fear, not shadows of confusion, but deep assurance that this is me. It will not be loud or rushed, but you will know. I do not send assignments like this often. I reserve them for moments when convergence is required, when destiny is ready to be revealed through unity, agreement, and alignment. This person may open doors you didn't even knock on. They may carry a key to something that's been locked for years, or they may simply carry a presence, the kind that awakens what grief tried to silence. Whatever their role, know this. I authored this connection before either of you took your first breath. I've kept it hidden until now, and their arrival marks a shift, not just in companionship, but in movement. When they come, things will begin to accelerate. When they speak, long-standing confusion will begin to lift. When they walk beside you, your steps will become lighter, not because they are your answer, but because they've been assigned to walk with you until you reach what I've promised. The reward for your approach is near. Stay open, stay discerning, and know you are not waiting alone. The table is turning right under their assumptions. You've been standing in a season that looked like stillness on the outside, but in the spirit realm, the landscape beneath your feet has already begun to tilt in your favor. The change hasn't been loud. It hasn't come with visible signs or public confirmation, because this shift was never meant to be detected early. I've been moving pieces while the room stayed unaware. I've been positioning favor around your name while others assumed nothing was happening. I kept it hidden to protect what I was doing from premature interference. The blessing that's forming was too delicate to announce. There were conversations that could have slowed it. There were voices that could have poisoned it. So I stayed silent, not because I forgot you, but because I wanted what's coming to be unshakable when it arrives. I've been turning the tide in places your feet haven't even touched yet. You've been focusing on survival, but I've been preparing restoration. You thought the delay meant denial, but it was actually precision. The change is unfolding in places you've not yet been invited to, in atmospheres you didn't even know were watching. And the reason it's been quiet is because I chose to do this one in a way that no hand could tamper with. There are blessings coming that no one will be able to take credit for. There are doors opening that no one will be able to say they unlocked. There are opportunities rising that will seem to appear out of nowhere. But you will know I planted them in secret when all you could see was silence. I do my most powerful work in hidden places. I don't need an audience to set things right. And now I'm flipping the script. Where you once were the one overlooked, now you will be the one others seek out. Where you once stood in the background unnoticed, now your voice will begin to carry weight. But I won't do it all at once. I will do it steadily, strategically. Because I'm not just shifting your life, I'm building something through it. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about proving anyone wrong. This is about proving me right. What I said over you still stands. What I declared in secret is about to take form in the open. And when it begins, you won't have to strive for it. The invitation will find you. The confirmation will arrive without your campaigning. The acceleration will feel sudden. But it's not sudden to me. I've been preparing the runway while you were learning how to walk without applause. You had no idea that each quiet act of obedience was causing things to tilt in your favor. Every time you chose faith over fear, even when no one saw, it was a push that turned the table further. Every time you stayed in alignment when you had the chance to retaliate. Every time you responded with grace instead of bitterness. Every time you stayed consistent without being celebrated, you were participating in the turning. And now the weight of all you've sown is demanding a return. Not because you manipulated anything, but because heaven honors integrity. Not because you fought for position, but because I honor the lowly. You'll notice the favor begin to follow you. You'll feel the atmosphere shift when you enter. You'll sense my hand moving, not in chaos, but in calm confidence. And those who tried to dismiss you will watch, unable to stop the rise, not because they are enemies, but because they weren't meant to build what I reserved for your hands. So do not make noise. Don't announce what I've kept veiled. Let me do the unveiling in my time. Let them see the shift as it happens, not when you try to explain it. Stay quiet. Stay focused. The table is turning right under their assumptions, and when it's fully set, you will sit, not to gloat, but to fulfill. This isn't your moment of vengeance. This is your moment of visibility, and it's already begun. The return is not a reversal. You keep looking for recovery in the same place where the loss happened, hoping restoration will arrive through the same hands that dropped you, or through the same environments where betrayal once breathed. But I need you to understand, I'm not sending compensation to your former position. I'm redirecting the return to meet you where you're going, not where you were broken. This recovery is not a reversal, it's a transformation. The enemy thought that when he took from you, it would leave you hollow. He assumed the theft would cause you to turn back, to chase after pieces I never told you to retrieve. But instead of chasing, you surrendered. And because of that surrender, I'm commanding a return that exceeds what was taken. But hear me, I will not place it where you lost it. That chapter is sealed. That place was part of your pruning, not your planting. And even though it hurt, I had to let certain things be stripped so you could be repositioned. The pain was real, yes, but so is the promise on the other side of it. And what's coming to you now won't just replace what was lost. It will redefine the very idea of restoration. This return carries no resemblance to what was removed. What I'm sending now is refined, elevated, stronger. You're not getting back the same. You're receiving what was matured in heaven's hands while you mourned in the valley. You didn't see it, but while you were releasing what was out of your control, I was multiplying what would soon be placed into your hands. You didn't need to beg. You didn't need to chase it down. Your obedience spoke louder than your grief. I counted the nights you stayed quiet when you could have demanded justice. I saw how you gave up the need to be right just to stay aligned with me. And that is what triggered this harvest. Not effort, but posture. Your willingness to walk away from what drained you made space for what will now overflow. I'm not just returning resources. I'm restoring opportunities that were withheld because of lies. I'm returning relationships that align with the real you, not the version that settled to keep peace. I'm restoring confidence where shame tried to dominate. I'm giving you back time through acceleration you can't explain. Yes, I can redeem years. I can gather what was scattered. I can fill what was emptied. But I won't send it where you used to be, because where you're headed now carries different soil. Your steps have moved, and my provision follows movement. That's why I told you to let go when I did. That's why I allowed the doors to close even while you were still knocking. I didn't want your harvest landing in the wrong territory. And now, as I prepare to release what's been held for you, I'm also drawing boundaries to keep out what once corrupted your peace. I'm not just blessing you, I'm shielding the blessing from everything that once drained your joy. You're not just being repaid, you're being repositioned for the kind of favor that doesn't just visit, it remains. But you must stop looking back. Stop scanning the past, expecting fruit to show up in soil that's already been judged unfit. The season of return is real, but it's forward. What you thought was left behind has actually been moved ahead of you. And as you step into obedience, it will meet you, pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. Don't mourn over what will not be restored in the place it left. I'm building something new, and the delivery is already in transit. Just stay in motion, stay in faith, stay in alignment. I haven't forgotten what was taken from you, but more importantly, I never forgot what I planned to give you in its place. Your exit was your rescue. You thought you walked away because you were weak, because you couldn't handle the pressure, because you weren't strong enough to endure the confusion that surrounded you. But child, that moment you called failure was actually the breakthrough I planned for your survival. That door you left behind wasn't your downfall. It was your way out. I was guiding your steps, even while your heart felt like it was breaking. I didn't let you stay there longer, because I saw what was forming behind the curtain. I knew the spiritual weight that would soon crush your ability to breathe, and I loved you too much to let you remain one more day in an atmosphere that was slowly draining your discernment, muting your identity, and burying your voice beneath the expectations of people who were never meant to steward your purpose. They couldn't see what I was doing in you. They misunderstood your transition as rebellion, but I called it rescue. They assumed your silence was retreat, but I saw it as surrender. What they labeled as giving up, I called divine redirection. You weren't retreating, you were being pulled out before a collapse. I couldn't let your character be suffocated beneath the demands of those who only wanted to use your gifting but never cared for your growth. I couldn't allow you to remain under a covering that refused to see your value unless it served their convenience. I know it didn't make sense in the moment, I know the grief was heavy and the loneliness deep, but if I had explained everything to you while I was removing you, you would have tried to stay for the sake of loyalty. But loyalty to people must never override alignment with me. And so I moved you swiftly, quietly, without explanation, because I was preserving what would have been shattered. There were things you could not discern because emotional ties blinded your spiritual clarity. So I intervened. You saw it as loss, I saw it as the beginning of something holy. That exit wasn't a misstep, it was the conclusion of an assignment. I never asked you to stay forever. I asked you to remain until the season was complete. And once the lesson was learned, once your capacity was stretched, once the growth had reached its final breath in that environment, I opened the way out. You didn't miss it, you obeyed it. Type yes if you are ready for the blessings that you are about to receive. And if you believe in Christianity, kindly show your support for our community by contributing super thanks from $50 to $100. And now the reason I'm reminding you is because there's still a part of your heart that wonders if you should have stayed. But I need you to stop trying to rewrite what I've already closed. I don't exit you without purpose. I don't relocate you without reason. And I never move you out of alignment. I move you into completion. I want you to see it as freedom now, not failure. I want you to understand that your departure didn't disqualify you. It positioned you. Had you stayed any longer, you would have compromised your peace, blurred your vision, and become numb to the very voice you now hear so clearly. Your capacity was being stifled. Your soul was becoming weary. And so I did what only I could do. I created an exit disguised as a breakdown. But what broke in that moment wasn't you. It was the grip they had placed on your obedience. You had outgrown the old wineskin, and I refused to let fresh oil be poured into something that would have leaked it. I moved you not just out of a location, but out of an old version of yourself. The version that sought to please everyone. The version that stayed small to be accepted. The version that questioned their own discernment just to avoid conflict. That version is no longer needed. What's ahead requires the version of you that knows my voice, even when no one else agrees with it. And now that you've stepped away, you're beginning to feel the strength again, the clarity, the boldness, the stirring. That's confirmation. You exited at the exact time I appointed, and soon you'll see why that exit was the greatest gift I could give you. The delay was for alignment, not denial. You assumed the waiting was a result of something lacking in you, that maybe your faith wasn't loud enough, your prayers not strong enough, or your growth not fast enough. But what you didn't see was that while I was working in you, I was also working in others connected to the outcome. Your promise wasn't just about your obedience. It required the obedience of people you hadn't met yet, individuals I've been preparing behind the scenes, shaping through their own wilderness seasons, cleansing from motives that would have distorted what I'm about to build through you. I could have answered you earlier, but the provision would have arrived incomplete. The connection would have been unstable, and the breakthrough would have lacked the structure necessary to last. So I slowed the timeline, not as punishment, but as protection. You've been ready in ways you couldn't see, but they weren't yet in position. Some had to be moved out of old agreements. Others had to be emptied of pride. Some had to be awakened to what I deposited inside them before they ever knew your name. Because what's coming to you won't be sustained by your strength alone. It requires community. It demands collaboration. And I don't build that kind of infrastructure through haste. I build it through divine synchronization. I couldn't let you step into the fulfillment while pieces of the equation were still fractured. I care too much about your longevity to rush your launch. And now, as things begin to move, you'll start encountering people who carry exactly what you lacked. Not because you're missing something, but because I designed it to require unity. The vision I placed in your heart was never meant to be carried in isolation. I'm sending people who will not compete with you, but will complement you. They won't resist your anointing. They'll recognize it. They won't ask you to shrink. They'll make room for your voice to rise. But they weren't ready when you were. That's why I stalled the next season. Not because of failure, but because I refused to connect you prematurely. You would have forced what was meant to flow. You would have built with bricks that weren't cured yet. You would have trusted hands that hadn't yet been emptied of their own agendas. I saw what you couldn't. I heard conversations you weren't in. I knew hearts that were still guarded, motives still mixed, and loyalty still divided. And I waited until their preparation matched your surrender. Even now, I'm still positioning a few. Some are just now awakening to their role. Some are having dreams about you before ever hearing your name. Some are being instructed to release past assignments so their hands are free when you arrive. I've woven a tapestry so intricate that when you finally meet them, it will feel like you've known them for years. The connection will be instant, not because of familiarity, but because of alignment. You'll look back and see that nothing was wasted, not a single moment of your pause, not a single stretch of your loneliness. Every delay was another person being refined. Every long night you spent waiting was a divine setup being solidified. And when they come, you won't need to explain who you are. They will already sense it. They will speak to your future without needing to be impressed by your past. And you will know it was me because only I could orchestrate such convergence. So do not lose heart. You are not forgotten. You are not being bypassed. You're being prepared to step into a space where every hand in the room was shaped to hold what you carry. And when all the pieces arrive, when the voices, the gifts, the resources, and the wisdom collide, your miracle will not just be personal, it will be generational. The delay wasn't denial, it was alignment, and the alignment is nearly complete. Your breakthrough is hidden in obedience. You searched everywhere your reason led you, through plans, possibilities, familiar doors, and well-lit paths. You followed what made sense, what felt predictable, what others said was the right direction. But breakthrough doesn't follow formulas. Miracles don't conform to maps. I never promised you answers at eye level. I promised you treasure in places only the surrendered find. I didn't hide your breakthrough from you to tease your faith. I concealed it to protect its purity. What I've prepared for you was never meant to be discovered through natural sight. It was designed to be revealed through obedience, through sensitivity, and through a trust so deep that it doesn't argue with direction, even when the road looks unreasonable. You tried everything you could logically piece together. You walked into rooms that appeared promising but were spiritually empty. You invested energy into people who looked aligned but lacked spiritual depth. You measured progress by metrics the world said mattered. But I was waiting until you were willing to follow me, even when nothing added up. Because where I've placed your miracle, reasoning will fail. It will look backward at first. It won't fit the timeline others expect. It won't match the method you rehearsed in your head. It won't come through the source you assumed. Because I didn't want you to give the credit to a system. I wanted you to know it was me. You prayed for answers, and I responded with instruction. You asked for clarity, and I gave you a whisper. You longed for signs, but I sent a nudge, because I wanted your spirit awake, not your logic alone engaged. My breakthrough often looks like interruption at first. It disrupts schedules, it confuses intellect, it challenges comfort. It leads you to a location that feels unfamiliar, but holds everything you've been crying out for. I didn't design this path for your head to understand. I designed it for your spirit to recognize. Remember when I told my servant Elijah to find oil in a widow's house during a famine? That answer made no sense to the flesh, but it unlocked supernatural provision. Or when I told my disciples to feed thousands with 5 loaves and 2 fish, the math never made sense, but the miracle multiplied. You keep asking for provision that feels predictable, but I'm releasing answers that can only be unlocked through your yes. Your yes is the access point. It opens doors logic never would have noticed, because logic only looks where light shines, but faith explores where I'm whispering. You thought the delay meant denial, but it was just me waiting until your dependence shifted. I was never hiding the outcome out of reach. I was drawing your heart deeper into surrender. I was waiting until you were willing to let go of the version of breakthrough you created in your mind. You wanted a way that looked clean. I designed a route that would break pride. You wanted something easy to explain. I planned something that would require you to say, only God could have done this. And now I'm about to show you where I hid the breakthrough. It's not going to show up where others told you to look. It won't follow the pattern you were taught to trust. It's going to emerge from an unlikely place, a place your past overlooked, a space your intellect avoided, a direction your peers didn't consider sacred. That's where I'll meet you. And when I do, you'll realize this wasn't just about the outcome. It was about transformation. I wasn't just getting the miracle to you. I was getting the miracle through you. I shaped your heart so that when the answer arrives, it doesn't distract you. It commissions you. So stop straining to find what only faith can unlock. Stop expecting what's holy to wear what's familiar. Start listening again, not with anxiety, but with expectation. I am not teasing your heart. I am teaching your faith, and what I hid from your logic, I am about to reveal to your obedience. The moment you step in the direction that looks foolish to man, but feels right in your spirit, you'll find the answer was waiting there all along. The door opens at my command. You've grown used to seeking, waiting, hoping, and pushing with all your strength just to catch a glimpse of movement. You've stood outside doors, knocking with faith only to hear silence. You've knocked with expectation only to be met with resistance. You've wondered if the delay was punishment or if the opportunity had passed you by altogether. But what you didn't realize was this: the next opening you walk into will not require your pounding. It will respond to my voice. I'm not asking you to force it, to prove your worth, or to convince the room you belong. I am not assigning you another season of striving. I am declaring a shift where access will come by my authority alone. This door isn't like the others. It's not built from man's opinions, nor held together by human systems. It's not based on qualifications or determined by connections. It's spiritual, it's sovereign, and it opens not when you've earned it, but when I speak. You've been conditioned to believe that effort equals entry. But what's coming next bypasses natural metrics. This is not about hustle. This is about alignment. This door responds to the weight of your obedience, not the volume of your performance. It's not intimidated by your history, nor limited by your resources. It waits for me, and I have already issued the command. While you've been preparing quietly, I've been establishing authority over this threshold. I've been speaking to people on the other side, stirring hearts that are attached to your next chapter. I've been loosening hinges on systems that tried to keep you out. I've been removing gatekeepers who were never meant to dictate your access. This is not about luck. This is about timing, and the time has arrived. When the door swings open, it will not creak or delay. It will not ask for credentials. It will not hesitate in response to your past. It will open wide because I have already stepped ahead of you. You will not have to knock this time. You will simply walk. And as you walk, you'll sense it, the difference, the weight of my presence accompanying you, the peace that surpasses logic, the clarity that replaces confusion. You'll feel the atmosphere shift, not just around you, but within you. You'll know this was the door I kept hidden until your spirit was strong enough not to idolize the opportunity. This door is not a prize. It is a passage, a transition, a divine setup for the next phase of purpose. It's not about entering a better place. It's about entering a truer version of what I originally authored for you. You won't walk in hoping to belong. You'll walk in carrying what others didn't even know they needed. Your presence will confirm your purpose. Your arrival will settle questions. And not because you're loud, but because my hand will rest visibly on everything you touch. And when people ask how you gained entrance, when they wonder why the door opened for you and not for others, you will simply know it was me. You didn't manipulate, you didn't beg, you didn't scheme, you surrendered. And surrender is what unlocked the moment. I'm telling you this now so that when it happens, you don't give the credit to anyone else, not even yourself. It's not about being good enough. It's not about being perfect. It's about being positioned, and you are. The past shaped your perspective. The pressure grew your capacity. The silence sharpened your hearing. And now your steps are aligned with my decree. Don't knock. Don't plead. Don't overthink. Just stay ready, because this door doesn't require your touch, only your presence. And when I open it, no one will be able to shut it. Not fear, not criticism, not opposition, not even you. It's already swinging open, not because of your force, but because of my favor. You were liberated, not reduced. You mourned over what slipped through your fingers. You grieved what felt like essential pieces disappearing when you needed them most. You questioned why I didn't preserve what once gave you stability. But what you didn't realize was this: what I took was not punishment. It was permission. Permission to grow beyond your attachments. Permission to walk without leaning on what no longer served your destiny. The people, positions, and patterns you lost were never the foundation. They were scaffolding for a time. And once I was ready to pour the next layer of strength into you, I had to strip away the substitutes. Because the future I'm building doesn't require props. It requires pure dependence on me. You thought the removal was regression. You thought the subtraction meant you had failed to steward what I gave. But I was not reducing your life. I was refining it. What looked like loss was actually liberation. I was cutting ties to agreements you didn't even realize you made. Agreements with fear, with comfort, with an identity built on affirmation, and with stability tied to temporary support. I needed you to see that your foundation was never the crowd, never the provision, never the platform. It was always me. And now, without the noise, you can finally hear me clearly. I watched as you tried to resurrect what I buried. I saw the way you held on to what was familiar, hoping it would return and bring peace. But peace won't come from what I asked you to release. I am the Prince of Peace, and I only dwell in what is surrendered. You tried to gather the broken pieces and rebuild what I intentionally dismantled. But now you're starting to see. I removed what was hindering the fullness of my voice in your life. I emptied your hands, not to leave them idle, but so I could fill them with what will last. The season you're stepping into can't coexist with expired support. The assignment on your life has matured, and immature attachments cannot travel with you. You need clarity that won't compete with opinions. You need companions who hear me, not just admire you. You need strength forged in stillness, not dependent on applause. So I pulled away everything that blurred your focus, not to isolate you, but to insulate you from deception. I shielded you by pruning. I rescued you through release. You're stronger now than you realize. Not because you're untouched by pain, but because you've survived without what you once depended on. And in that survival, you've gained discernment. You've learned to walk in rooms without shrinking. You've discovered what it means to be anchored in a storm, not by circumstances, but by my presence. I didn't leave you when the support left. I became louder. I didn't abandon you when the doors shut. I became closer. And now everything you do from here will be rooted in me, not borrowed from what you used to need. I want you to understand something very clearly. What I remove, I replace with purpose. I never take without intention. If I strip away, it's because I'm revealing what never served you in the first place. You don't need what I took. What's coming will not require you to return to that comfort. What's coming is built on foundation, not feeling, on assignment, not appearance, on eternal weight, not temporary warmth. And when it arrives, you'll thank me, not just for what I gave, but for what I took away. Because only then will you see how every loss became a turning point. Every disappointment was divine redirection. Every absence was my protection. You are not empty. You are being entrusted. You are not alone. You are being anchored. You are not behind. You are being positioned. I removed what you clung to so you could cling to me. And now your roots are growing deeper than the reach of the storm. Your footing is becoming unshakable. And from this place, I will build something that lasts beyond seasons, beyond trends, beyond human praise. What I'm about to place in your hands won't fall like the old. Because this time, your strength won't come from what you hold, but from who holds you. Amen. My beloved child, take this moment and let it ripple outward. Send this word to someone whose hope is fading. This message wasn't just for you. It's for the days when the silence feels loud and the way seems hidden. Time presses on, but you are not behind. You are exactly where grace has placed you. Lift your head. You are part of a divine unfolding. If this reached into your soul, subscribe and come back. We're walking deeper into wisdom, into light. Pass this message on to someone wandering, someone weary. Help them find the path again. Until we speak again, stay grounded in love, anchored in faith, and remember, your life is a testimony in the making. Amen.